What's the strangest thing you've ever sipped in a fancy cup? Here, in the world of Maya nobles, the answer is chocolate, though not the kind you're picturing. Forget the silky sweet bar in your fridge. This is bitter, foamy, and served with a smugness that could rival any modern barista. You walk into the courtyard of a noble household in the Maya lowlands. The air is warm, heavy with the smell of maize dough, roasted cacao, and faint hints of sweat, because personal hygiene here was, let's say, experimental. Nobles took pride in appearing fragrant, but underneath their layers of perfumes, you might notice they weren't exactly squeaky clean. Baths happened, yes, but not daily, and the sense of the feast tended to mask much of what wasn't washed away. The fact, cacao wasn't just food, it was currency, medicine, and divine ritual rolled into one. Nobles believed that to sip cacao, especially when whipped into a froth, was to taste the god's own drink. The foam mattered more than the liquid. If the froth collapsed before reaching your lips, you were basically drinking failure in a cup. Your sandals scrape against limestone as you're ushered toward a long bench covered in woven mats. Servants, mostly women, rush about with tall clay vessels. They pour liquid chocolate from one pot held high above their heads into another below, letting the drink splash and churn until a rich crown of bubbles rises. This is their version of a milk frother. No electricity required, just steady arms and a tolerance for sticky floors. The obscure tidbit to sweeten their breath, some nobles chewed pellets made of pine resin mixed with crushed flowers. The resin doubled as glue for pottery repairs. So technically, they walked around with the same substance, sticking together broken cups and their molars, multitasking at its finest. Historians still debate whether the nobles genuinely believed chocolate foam held supernatural power, or if it was more of an elite fashion statement, like carrying a handbag so tiny you can't fit your keys inside, but insisting it's stylish. You probably won't make it through this day if you're squeamish about communal cups. The noble beside you lifts one, takes a long sip, and hands it casually in your direction, chocolate mustache and all. Germ theory won't be invented for more than a millennium, so bottoms up. Before we go deeper, let me gently remind you, if you're enjoying this slow walk through the sticky, foamy halls of history, please like and subscribe. It truly helps. And if you're awake enough, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening. Now let's ease into tonight's journey, deeper into the feast, where smells grow thicker, conversation slower, and the noble's idea of hygiene becomes stranger by the sip. You follow the servants into a grand hall, where painted murals wrap the walls, flickering torches make jaguars leap, and maize gods shimmer in motion. A low table stretches the length of the room, already set with bowls of tamales, turkey in chili sauce, and of course, endless frothy cacao. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat, careful not to wrinkle your borrowed tunic. A noble across from you adjusts the jade beads dangling from his ears. His skin shines with copal incense rubbed directly into the pores, a fragrant trick meant to ward off body odor. It smells like a sacred temple gift shop. But when he raises his arms to reach for a tamale, the illusion falters. Here's the historical fact. Maya nobles often blackened their teeth with plant-based dyes, not out of neglect, but as a symbol of beauty. Imagine a room full of aristocrats, smiling, with rows of gleaming, inky black teeth. It was a mark of refinement, like today's veneers, only reversed. As you chew, you notice something strange. The nobles spit occasionally into small clay jars, placed discreetly beside them, not because they dislike the food, though turkey sinew can be chewy, but because part of maintaining oral hygiene meant rinsing the mouth with diluted cacao or herbal infusions, then spitting into these containers. Later, servants would discreetly carry them away. You try not to think too hard about where they're emptied. The obscure tidbit: some nobles believed sweat carried spiritual energy, so instead of washing it off too often, they smeared fragrant oils over it. The result was a layered aroma, a base note of human musk, topped with overripe flowers and a splash of incense. Eau de noble, if you will. Historians still debate whether this layering of scent was genuinely considered cleansing, or whether it was simply a practical way of coping with the humid climate and scarce fresh water for daily bathing. Either way, the result is memorable. You watch as another servant brings out a tall drinking vessel decorated with painted glyphs. It reads like an Instagram handle, announcing ownership. This is the drinking cup of so-and-so. If you're tempted to swipe it as a souvenir, don't. Not only is it priceless, but also it's probably sticky with centuries of lip prints. 3 light jokes float into your mind. The nobles are basically running the first foam art competition, only without heart shapes or leaf swirls. Their perfume layering game makes modern department store spritzers look restrained. And as for the communal cups, let's just say it's a miracle they didn't invent the common cold before the rest of us. You lean back, trying to breathe through your mouth as the scents mingle. The chatter softens, and the chocolate froth keeps flowing. Somewhere outside, night insects hum a sleepy rhythm. Inside, you realize the feast is less about eating and more about displaying wealth, status, and the endurance to drink cup after cup of bitter foam without grimacing. Your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the torchlight and the drone of noble conversation. Half politics, half gossip. Remember that pine resin chewing gum from earlier? Someone pops one in now, their jaw working slowly as they lean close to whisper secrets. You're not sure whether you're meant to feel honored or overwhelmed, but you do know one thing. The night is just beginning. The night stretches on, and so does the flow of cacao. You shuffle a little on your reed mat, the fibers scratching faintly against your legs. Servants sweep through the hall like silent shadows, refilling cups before they're even empty. It's both impressive and a little unsettling, like someone constantly topping off your coffee, even though you swore you were done 3 cups ago. A noble leans in, his breath warm with chocolate and hints of fermented maize. He speaks of politics you don't understand, pointing vaguely at the mural of a king striking down captives. You nod politely, the universal gesture for, I have no idea what you're saying, but I respect the enthusiasm. Here's the historical fact. Cacao at these feasts wasn't just for drinking. It also came in the form of food pastes, sauces, and even medicines. Archaeological finds show vessels with residues of cacao mixed with chili and honey. Imagine spreading spicy chocolate paste on your tamale. Delicious? Maybe. Confusing? Absolutely. The noble beside you adjusts the feathers in his headdress, the long quills brushing against your cheek. You resist the urge to sneeze, His skin gleams with another layer of scented oil, applied during the feast itself. Yes, nobles sometimes reapplied their perfumes mid-banquet, like modern teenagers spritzing body spray in a school hallway. It only made the air heavier, a competition of floral versus resin versus sweat. The obscure tidbit, archaeologists believe nobles occasionally painted their fingernails with bright mineral pigments, red, yellow, black, anything to set themselves apart. Some pigments, unfortunately, were slightly toxic. But what's a little poisoning when your manicure looks regal? Historians still debate whether these pigments were applied as a regular fashion habit or reserved only for ritual occasions. The evidence is smudged, quite literally, on broken pottery fragments where handprints linger. You try to focus as another cup of chocolate is pushed into your hands. The foam tickles your upper lip, bitter and earthy. It's not sweet at all, and your tongue prickles from the chili stirred in. You stifle a cough, pretending this was exactly what you expected. After all, nobody wants to be the guest who can't handle noble-grade cacao. 3 wry observations bubble up. Maya, nobles basically invented the bottomless cup centuries before modern diners. Their hygiene routine feels less like cleansing and more like marinating. And the more chocolate you drink, the less you care about any of it. The hall grows louder, laughter bouncing off painted walls. Somewhere outside, drums start to pulse in the night air, summoning dancers who will appear soon. You're tempted to excuse yourself for fresh air, but curiosity anchors you. After all, the feast has only revealed its first layer, and you sense stranger customs yet to come. The drums outside grow louder, steady as a heartbeat. Nobles rise slowly, some a bit unsteady from the fermented drinks served alongside cacao. You follow them into the courtyard, where moonlight silvers the limestone walls. Torches flare, smoke rising like pale ribbons into the night. In the center, dancers whirl with painted bodies and feathered costumes, their movements sharp yet fluid. Sweat glistens under the firelight. And here's the catch. Instead of wiping it away, attendants rush forward to smear more fragrant oils across their skin, mixing musk with resin until the dancers shine like lacquered statues. The fact, sweat wasn't just tolerated, it was revered. Maya nobles believed sweat was infused with life force, especially during ritual dances. Some texts suggest warriors even offered their sweat in ceremonies, as if it were a holy liquid. That gives working up a sweat a whole new dimension. You stand among nobles, murmuring approval, their blackened teeth flashing in the torchlight. One adjusts his elaborate collar of jade beads. Another fans herself lazily with palm leaves. The night is humid, thick with human scent, flowers and smoke. It's a cocktail you won't find on any modern menu. The obscure tidbit to freshen the air during feasts. Nobles sometimes burned cacao shells, mixed with herbs as incense. So not only were they drinking chocolate, they were literally inhaling it. Talk about commitment to a brand. Historians still debate whether these practices of layering scents, burning shells, smearing oils, chewing resin, were more about genuine cleanliness or an arms race of olfactory dominance. Imagine ancient nobles competing not with wealth alone, but with who could smell the most divine. The drums throb louder, and the dancers leap higher. You feel the ground vibrate faintly beneath your feet. A servant passes by with another clay cup, this one containing a frothy cacao spiced with maize and vanilla. You hesitate, but politeness wins. The foam slides across your tongue, bitter and floral, like coffee brewed in a flower shop. 3 subtle jokes come to mind. With all this sweat and incense, the feast feels like history's first overcrowded yoga studio. Burning cacao shells as air freshener is basically the Maya version of chocolate-scented candles. And when nobles reapply oils mid-dance, you can't help but think they're inventing sweat-proof perfume centuries too early. The drums slow, the dancers bow, and the nobles clap politely, their palms sticky with oil and resin. You realize this isn't just a feast. It's theater, ritual, politics, and sensory overload rolled into one. You shift your gaze toward the darker edges of the courtyard, where servants whisper and prepare the next round of the evening. Something tells you the chocolate, the sweat, and the peculiar hygiene habits are far from the strangest thing you'll witness tonight. You linger at the edge of the courtyard, the night air clinging damply to your skin. A servant ushers you toward a smaller chamber off to the side, where nobles retreat between courses. Inside, the flicker of torchlight reveals polished stone benches and bowls filled with fragrant pastes. At first glance, you might think they're sauces for the meal. But no, these are personal care supplies. The fact, Maya nobles often used ground flowers, crushed seashells, and even powdered hematite to create pastes for skin treatments. These concoctions weren't just cosmetic, they symbolized purity, vitality, and social standing. Think of it as the ancient spa day, minus cucumber slices for the eyes. You watch as a noble dips his fingers into a bowl and smears a reddish paste across his cheeks. Another rubs a sticky mixture into her arms, the scent sharp and mineral. The air grows thick with competing aromas, and you're half tempted to join in just to blend with the crowd. But then you remember some of these ingredients were mildly abrasive. Beauty is pain, or in this case, exfoliation by seashell. The obscure tidbit: one record suggests nobles sometimes plucked body hair with obsidian flakes, an act both precise and painful. You can imagine the hiss of breath as sharp stone meets skin, followed by a proud glance in a polished obsidian mirror. Smoothness, apparently, was worth the sting. Historians still debate whether these grooming practices were reserved only for feasts and ceremonies, or whether nobles maintained them in daily life. Evidence leans both ways, leaving room for a little scholarly eyebrow raising. Someone offers you a dab of paste, gesturing kindly. You smear a cautious streak on your forearm. It smells like crushed roses and metal, not unpleasant if you ignore the faint itch that follows. You smile politely, because what else do you do when covered in mystery goop at a 1,000-year-old party? 3 wry thoughts whisper through your mind. Nobles were basically inventing the world's first luxury skincare line, seashell exfoliant included. Plucking body hair with obsidian makes modern waxing seem merciful. And if perfumes don't hide the sweat, maybe a layer of hematite paste will distract the nose. The nobles laugh, chat, and continue their spa routine as casually as if they were passing around hors d'oeuvres. You catch your reflection in a polished stone, smudged, shiny, and faintly ridiculous. The night stretches on, And so does your endurance. The chamber doors open again, and you follow the nobles back into the main hall. The feast has resumed, though the food now seems more symbolic than nourishing. Platters of maize, tamales, venison, and beans are presented with great ceremony, then barely touched. What truly matters is the cacao, still poured high into cups, foam spilling over like frothy crowns. Here's your historical fact. Cacao beans were so valuable in Maya society, they served as currency. A single bean might buy you a ripe avocado, while a rabbit could cost 10, which means these nobles are essentially drinking their wealth in liquid form, each gulp worth a day's wages. The noble beside you gestures grandly with his cup, chocolate froth dripping onto the mat. His teeth gleam black, his breath sweetened by pine resin. When he leans closer, you catch a whiff of both perfume and something else, fermented cacao. Some nobles preferred their chocolate mildly alcoholic, letting it sour before frothing it up. To your tongue, it tastes like coffee, beer, and vinegar. Holding hands, the obscure tidbit. Nobles sometimes decorated their serving spoons with tiny bells. Each scoop of sauce or cacao made a delicate jingle, turning mealtime into a kind of performance. Imagine slurping soup with background music, courtesy of your utensils. Historians still debate whether the jingling spoons were purely aesthetic or if they held ritual meaning, perhaps to ward off spirits or signal divine approval of each bite. Either way, the sound fills the hall now, a faint chime beneath the low hum of conversation. You sip again, foam clinging stubbornly to your upper lip. Servants stand ready with cloths to wipe nobles' mouths, but you're left to discreetly lick it away. Not the most elegant moment, but at least no one's watching too closely. 3 quiet jokes float through your mind. Drinking cacao as currency is the ultimate liquid assets strategy. The jingling spoons make dinner sound like a very delicate percussion concert, and honestly, if your drink tastes this sour, maybe the gods really do want it. The night hums around you, drums in the distance, laughter in the hall, bells on spoons. You feel both included and slightly overwhelmed, as though the feast has no clear end, and perhaps it doesn't. The Maya noble world thrives on endurance, spectacle, and the kind of hygiene rituals that are more fragrant than effective. Your eyelids grow heavy again, but the nobles show no signs of slowing. More cacao, more incense, more layers of oil. You realize you'll need to pace yourself because the feast is far from over, and the strangest habits may still be waiting in the shadows. You notice the nobles beginning to recline now, their mats softened with woven cotton cushions. The air has turned dense with candle smoke and incense, so heavy that each breath feels like sipping perfume. A servant hands you yet another vessel of cacao, this time decorated with tiny painted glyphs shaped like twisting serpents. It feels weighty in your palm, more symbol than cup. Here's the fact. Cacao vessels were often inscribed with the owner's name, almost like a monogrammed coffee mug. Archaeologists have found hundreds, each announcing with pride, "This is the drinking vessel of so-and-so." It was a way of stamping identity into clay, ensuring no noble's cup got confused at the party. A noble across from you reclines with his cup, his lips rimmed with chocolate foam. He tips it back lazily, then lets out a satisfied sigh that resonates in the chamber like he's just nailed the ending of a long speech. You can't help but notice the faint brown streak running down his chin. Hygiene, once again, seems like an afterthought at best. The obscure tidbit to perfume their breath during long feasts. Some nobles reportedly chewed on cacao beans themselves, raw and bitter, then spat the skins onto the floor. The crunch echoes faintly in the room, followed by little plops as the husks land among the mats. It's not the kind of mess you'd expect at an elite banquet. But then again, their standards differ. Historians still debate whether this spitting was seen as perfectly acceptable table behavior, or if only certain contexts allowed it. Some argue it was part of ritual purification. Others suspect it was just another excuse to show off who had enough beans to chew and discard. Your stomach churns slightly, a mix of too much cacao and too little fresh air. You lean back, trying to distract yourself with the murals painted high above, scenes of kings with jaguar pelts, gods scattering maize, nobles sipping, you guessed it, foamy chocolate. The paintings seem to wink knowingly at you, as though reminding you this frothy ritual has been going on for centuries. 3 light jokes drift in. Monogrammed cups make this feel less like a feast and more like the first Starbucks. Spitting cacao husks on the floor? Let's just say nobles invented open floor plans in more ways than one. And if chocolate foam dripping down your chin is a status symbol, then everyone's winning tonight. The music swells again. Drums echo from outside, and flutes trill, as if carried on the breeze. The nobles begin to sway, some rising to dance, their skin slick with layers of oil that shimmer in torchlight. You press your cup to your lips one more time, wondering how long you can endure this endless cycle of drink, scent, and spectacle. The dancing spills into the courtyard again. You follow, stepping carefully across limestone tiles, still warm from the day's sun. The moon rides high overhead, and the stars crowd close, as if curious about the revelry below. The nobles circle around the dancers, their voices rising in half-song, half-chant. Here's your historical fact. Maya nobles often wore elaborate feather capes, dyed in vivid blues, reds and greens, colors reserved for the elite. Feathers from quetzal birds were especially prized, so much so that plucking one from the wild was an act reserved for specialists under royal oversight. Tonight, the courtyard shimmers like a living rainbow as these feathers ripple and shift in torchlight. The scent in the air grows even heavier now. Sweat drips freely from the dancers, who are promptly attended by servants smearing fresh oils and resins onto their skin. At this point, the line between hygiene and seasoning feels dangerously thin. If you close your eyes, the whole courtyard smells like a perfumed kitchen on a humid day. The obscure tidbit, nobles sometimes sprinkled powdered copal or ground cacao shells directly into their hair, believing it enhanced fragrance and warded off evil. When one noble twirls past you, his braids release a faint, spicy sweetness into the night. It's oddly comforting, though you wonder how long the powder stays before sweat turns it into paste. Historians still debate whether this fragrant hair treatment was a widespread fashion or just an occasional experiment among the elite. The evidence is fragmentary. A few dusty strands found buried in tombs, stubbornly clinging to their scented powders centuries later. You sit on the edge of a low stone bench, watching as the nobles clap and laugh. Someone shoves a fresh cup into your hands again, More frothy cacao. This time, it's flavored with annatto, giving it a reddish hue that gleams almost like blood in the torchlight. You hesitate, then sip. The taste is earthy, peppery, and far too strong, but the nobles around you nod approvingly, as if you've passed another test. 3 sly jokes flit by. Feathered cloaks so extravagant, they'd make modern fashion week look underdressed. Scented hair powders, because who needs shampoo when you can season your scalp like a stew? And at this point, drinking cacao feels less like a pleasure and more like an initiation. The music swells higher, and the nobles sway in rhythm, their shadows stretching across the courtyard walls. You feel the pulse of drums in your chest, the heat of the torches on your skin, and the bitterness of cacao coating your tongue. The night deepens, but the feast shows no sign of ending. You sense you've only scratched the surface of what these nobles consider good manners, and stranger customs are yet to come. The night air presses warm against your skin as the feast continues. You've lost count of how many cups of frothy cacao you've sipped, but each new one arrives as if the universe itself has decided you're under-caffeinated. Nobles recline around you, fanning themselves with woven palm fronds. The rhythmic creak of those fans mixes with the steady hum of insects outside the courtyard walls. Here's a fact to steady you. Cacao wasn't merely a beverage of indulgence. Among Maya nobles, it was a symbol of social contracts, marriage, negotiations, political alliances, even disputes between rival households were sealed with cacao drinks. If you were offered a cup, you were expected to drink. Refusing wasn't just rude, it was unthinkable. A noble leans toward you, lips darkened by black dye, foam still decorating his mustache. He gestures broadly to the cup in your hand, as if to say, "You're one of us now." You take another sip, bitter and spicy, and nod. The room smells of cacao, sweat, and burning incense, a blend that feels equal parts intoxicating and suffocating. The obscure tidbit: some nobles painted the insides of their mouths with plant-based dyes for feasts, a flourish few would ever see, but all would admire if they happened to catch a glimpse. Imagine the boldness of opening your mouth mid-laugh to reveal a tongue dyed indigo or crimson. It was less about hygiene and more about shock value. Historians still debate whether these mouth dyes were reserved only for grand ceremonies, or if some fashion-forward nobles wore them daily. The evidence, after all, fades quickly, just like lipstick after a meal. Your gaze drifts toward the servants moving silently along the edges of the room. They carry clay jars filled with water infused with herbs. Every so often, they sprinkle it onto the stone floor, tamping down the dust and freshening the airs. The damp stones release a cool, earthy smell, a momentary relief from the intensity of perfumes and cacao. 3 light jokes cross your mind. At this point, refusing cacao is the ancient equivalent of declining grandma's cooking. You just don't. Mouth dyes are basically history's first edible cosmetics, only with less FDA approval. And honestly, watching servants perfume the floor while nobles drip sweat feels like misdirected effort. The nobles laugh and chat, their voices weaving in and out of the drum beats from outside. You notice the way they adjust their jewelry constantly, Jade beads, shell necklaces, feathered ornaments, all glittering faintly in the torchlight. The feast isn't just about eating or drinking, it's about being seen, scented, and admired. The cacao in your cup grows tepid, but before you can finish it, another servant sweeps by with a fresh pour, the foam rising like a miniature storm cloud. You smile weakly, realizing this night might outlast you. By now, the torches burn low, their smoke curling upward in slow, hypnotic spirals. You expect the feast to wind down, but instead, the nobles seem to be only warming up. Conversation grows louder, laughter sharper. A noble claps his hands, and attendants bring forth trays not of food, but of personal grooming tools. Here's the fact. Obsidian blades and stingray spines were used not only for ritual bloodletting, but also for grooming. Nobles shaved or trimmed hair with tools sharp enough to slice paper thin. The line between sacred and practical was blurred. Your razor might also serve as your sacrificial knife. One noble reclines, while an attendant plucks stray hairs from his chin with a shard of obsidian. Another has her nails polished with a paste of crushed minerals, leaving them gleaming faintly under the firelight. Hygiene here isn't about cleanliness. It's about transforming the body into a canvas of status. The obscure tidbit. Some nobles scented their fingernails with drops of resin so that every gesture, lifting a cup, pointing during a story, released a faint fragrance. Imagine perfume so committed it clings to your fingertips. Historians still debate whether these nail rituals were universal among the elite, or if they marked particular occasions. The scarcity of direct evidence leaves the question tantalizingly open. You sit back, mesmerized by the scene. The air feels heavy with resin and sweat, yet strangely soothing in rhythm. Grooming becomes theater. Each noble watched closely, admired for their patience under obsidian's bite, or their elegance in presenting polished nails. 3 sly observations rise. Calling this self-care feels generous. It's more like self-display. Obsidian razors sound terrifyingly effective. No wonder barbers today stick with steel. And if your nails smell nicer than your clothes, you may be overcompensating. The nobles return to their cacao with renewed vigor, hands now polished, hair freshly perfumed, skin gleaming with oil. Servants sweep away discarded shards and bowls of paste, replacing them with yet more chocolate vessels. Your head swims slightly. The combination of heat, incense, and endless cacao, leaving you drowsy. The conversations blur into a low hum, broken only by bursts of laughter and the occasional clink of jade beads. You glance toward the courtyard, where the drums have softened to a lull, steady as a heartbeat. The feast doesn't end. It only shifts form, each hour revealing new layers of strangeness. Each custom more fragrant, foamy, and oddly captivating than the last. The drums outside fade to a gentler rhythm, a soft heartbeat pulsing through the night. You half expect silence, maybe rest, but instead the nobles lean forward, their eyes gleaming in the torchlight. Something new is about to unfold. Servants carry in great ceramic bowls, filled not with food, but with steaming water infused with herbs. The steam rises, curling like ghostly fingers through the smoke. Here's a fact to ground you. Maya nobles often used herbal steams for cleansing and ritual renewal. Leaves of basil, flowers of marigold, and sprigs of sage were tossed into hot water to create vapor baths. These weren't full-body immersions, like the sweat lodges of other cultures, but small, perfumed treatments, more face steam than spa retreat. You watch as nobles lean over the bowls, draping cloths across their heads, inhaling deeply. Their faces shine with moisture, beads of sweat mingling with the oils and pastes already smeared across their skin. The effect is halfway between rejuvenation and melting wax figurine. The obscure tidbit. Some texts suggest nobles believed the steam carried prayers upward, that the vapor itself was a messenger to the gods. Exhaling into the bowl, they imagined their own breath joining the sacred mist, floating heavenward with the fragrance of herbs. A noble coughs, sputtering into his cloth, but no one seems bothered. Devotion comes in many forms, even wheezy ones. Historians still debate whether these steams were meant more for ritual purification or actual hygiene. The line is foggy, like the steam itself. You try leaning toward one of the bowls, breathing in the warm vapor. It smells of basil and smoke, earthy, yet oddly comforting. Your pores prickle, your eyes water, and you wonder whether the faint dizziness is cleansing or simply a side effect of incense overload. 3 dry jokes slip into your mind. Think of it as history's first DIY facial, only with less cucumber water and more smoke. Nobles may have invented aromatherapy, though smells like damp herbs probably wouldn't sell well today. And honestly, watching them sweat through layers of perfume is like adding water to already soggy bread. The nobles emerge from the steaming cloths, red-faced, refreshed, or at least claiming to be. Servants sweep the bowls away, carrying the fragrant water to splash along the courtyard stones. You follow the drifting steam with your eyes, noticing how it curls against the murals, as if painting new, temporary gods on the walls. You exhale, heavy-lidded, as the feast drifts into its next strange phase. The courtyard grows quieter, though not calmer. A new ritual begins, one less about fragrance and more about sound. Nobles gather in a circle, their cups of cacao raised high, as attendants bring out rattles, drums, and shell trumpets. Music, it seems, is as essential to hygiene as oils or incense. Here's the fact. Maya feasts often included ritual music and chanting, believed to harmonize the body and spirit. The very vibrations of sound were thought to cleanse unseen impurities, aligning nobles with divine forces. In other words, music wasn't entertainment, it was soap for the soul. You watch as one noble tips his head back, chocolate foam clinging stubbornly to his lip, and blows a deep note through a conch shell. The sound rolls across the courtyard like distant thunder. Others shake rattles, the seeds inside clattering in uneven rhythm. A woman's voice rises in song, wavering, drawn out, haunting. The obscure tidbit. Some rattles were filled with cacao beans instead of seeds, a double layering of symbolism. Each shake echoed both the feast and the sacred drink. When you hear the faint rattle, you can't help but imagine beans leaping inside, as restless as your stomach, after so much bitter froth. Historians still debate whether nobles believed these instruments literally purified the air or whether the ritual was more symbolic, a sonic cleansing of the feast's excesses. The music surrounds you, vibrating in your chest, filling the spaces between heartbeats. Nobles sway, their perfumed hair releasing little bursts of fragrance with each movement. A servant hands you a rattle, its clay surface warm from many hands. You shake it gently. The sound is dry, earthy, oddly intimate, as if whispering through seeds. 3 sly observations flit through your weary mind. Shell trumpets might be history's first noise, complaints waiting to happen. If shaking a cacao-filled rattle counts as hygiene, then you've basically brushed your teeth just by playing along. And for all their efforts, the nobles still smell like incense-soaked gym socks. The circle sways, voices weaving in and out, rising and falling like waves. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the music scrub your thoughts clean, or at least drown them beneath a tide of rhythm. When you open them again, the feast is still alive, torches guttering low, cacao cups still in motion. The night feels endless, rolling forward like a drumbeat with no final note, and you realize you're only halfway through. The strangest rituals perhaps have not even begun. The night deepens, yet the nobles appear untouched by fatigue. You, however, feel every cup of bitter cacao thrumming in your veins. A servant glides past with yet another tray, and you accept out of politeness, though your stomach mutters a quiet protest. The foam lingers stubbornly, clinging to the rim of your mouth like an uninvited guest. Here's your grounding fact. Maya nobles valued cacao not only for its bitterness, but for its frothy crown. The foam symbolized breath itself, the vital essence of life. Without foam, the drink was considered incomplete, almost lifeless. Imagine ordering coffee today and being told the milk froth is the soul, and the liquid underneath is just filler. One noble across the mat demonstrates the point with flair. He pours chocolate from one vessel, held high to another, at his knees, the stream unbroken, splashing into bubbles. He beams at the foam that blooms, and others nod in solemn approval. You clap politely, though your inner voice whispers, it's essentially the world's first latte art competition. The obscure tidbit: some nobles reportedly flavored their cacao with chili strong enough to make eyes water, believing the fiery kick purified the body. You watch as one noble sips, coughs, and wipes tears from his face, declaring himself cleansed. Spiritual purity, apparently, comes with a burning tongue. Historians still debate whether the chili was purely medicinal, symbolic, or simply an acquired taste. Either way, the nobles sip bravely, each wince hidden behind a practiced smile. You bring your cup closer, inhaling the faint, smoky bitterness. The foam tickles your upper lip. You swallow, the chili sting catching at the back of your throat. Your eyes water instantly, though you disguise it with a half-hearted cough. Nobles glance your way, nodding with knowing approval, as if suffering is part of the ritual. 3 wry observations flicker in your mind. Foam worship makes sense when you realize bubbles are free, but they sure do look fancy. Chili-laced cacao is less hot chocolate and more trial by fire. And watching nobles cry through their drinks might be the truest display of solidarity you've seen all evening. The music softens, the crowd hums, and the air grows heavy again with incense and sweat. You sit back, heart racing from chili and caffeine, wondering how anyone survives this ritual night after night. The nobles don't just endure, they thrive, gleaming in oil and pride, their cups always full. A sudden hush falls over the courtyard as the king himself enters, draped in a cloak of quetzal feathers that shimmer like trapped starlight. The nobles bow their heads, though not too low. Humility has its limits. When your hair is styled with perfumed powders, you mimic their gestures, though your neck protests from the hours of stillness. Here's the fact. Royal appearances at feasts weren't casual. Kings used these gatherings to display power, weaving politics into every sip of cacao. Each shared cup was a contract, each toast a performance of authority. Tonight, every foam bubble seems to carry his name. The king accepts a tall vessel of chocolate, froth piled so high it threatens to spill. He sips delicately, leaving a neat ring of foam on his blackened teeth. The nobles murmur in admiration. You wonder if anyone notices the streak of oil glistening on his cheek, a reminder that even kings sweat under feather cloaks. The obscure tidbit. Some records suggest kings had designated foam specialists, attendants whose only duty was to whip chocolate into the tallest, richest bubbles. Imagine your job description being chief froth maker, a noble profession. If sticky, historians still debate whether the king truly enjoyed these marathon feasts or endured them as political theater. The line between indulgence and obligation is blurred in every account. You watch as servants scurry to refresh the king's cloak with incense smoke, waving censers until the air grows dense enough to sting your eyes. He raises his cup again, and the nobles cheer, chocolate foam splattering as they lift their own vessels. You join in, though your arm feels heavy, your stomach heavier still. 3 dry jokes simmer in your thoughts. A king with a personal foam team is 1 latte away from inventing Starbucks royalty. Oh, feather cloaks look divine, but they're basically ancient weighted blankets in tropical heat. And when nobles cheer with mouths full of chocolate, it's less regal, more messy, milk mustache convention. The king settles into his seat, conversation swelling again like a tide. You lean back, eyelids drooping, the rhythm of drums and the sweetness of incense blurring together. The feast has reached its peak, or perhaps only another plateau in this endless climb of foam, fragrance, and ritual. You close your eyes briefly, letting the night wash over you, the sounds and scents mingling until you can't tell whether you're guest or dreamer in this ancient, frothy theater. The feast stretches into an hour that feels unpinned from the clock. You lose track of time, though perhaps that's the point. Cacao is less a drink and more a tide pulling you along. The nobles lean back on their mats, their laughter rolling through the courtyard like lazy thunder. You find yourself lulled, though the foam clinging to your lips won't let you forget the bitterness. Here's a fact to anchor you. Cacao among the Maya was not sweet. No sugar existed in this part of the world at the time. Instead, nobles mixed it with maize, chili, flowers, and even honey if they were feeling experimental. The modern chocolate bar you know would taste like heresy to them. Childish, perhaps. Tonight's drink is bitter, smoky, peppery, and it refuses to be anything else. A noble gestures at you with a cacao-stained smile, insisting you try a new variation. A servant appears with a clay vessel streaked in red paint, filled with cacao flavored with crushed flowers. The foam carries hints of jasmine and rose, cloying in its sweetness, yet still anchored by bitter earth. You sip cautiously, unsure whether you're drinking dessert or perfume. The obscure tidbit: some nobles reportedly used cacao as a form of toothpaste, rubbing the crushed beans against their teeth. You glance around at the blackened grins, trying to imagine cacao paste as both hygiene and currency. It's unsettling, though creative. Historians still debate whether cacao truly had medicinal value for the teeth or whether it was symbolic, another gesture of devotion to a substance already weighted with spiritual meaning. The nobles keep sipping, their mouths dark, their lips frothy. A servant rushes forward with a damp cloth to wipe the king's chin, a gesture so tender it borders on comedic. You wonder if history's most powerful rulers were constantly being dabbed with towels by weary attendants. 3 sly jokes ripple through your tired mind. Bitter cacao as toothpaste would definitely stop you from snacking between meals. Drinking flowers tastes elegant, but it feels a little like kissing a soap bar. And if you need a servant to wipe your chin mid-toast, maybe the foam has won. The night hums with warmth and insects, the scent of copal incense heavy as a blanket. You lean back, your eyes catching the flicker of torches, your ears full of laughter and drums. The feast is endless, the foam eternal, and you realize you've been folded neatly into its rhythm. Whether you like it or not, the nobles begin a new round of rituals, this one less about drinking and more about performance. Servants bring out trays of carved gourds filled with powders, pigments of red, yellow, and black. Nobles dip their fingers into the colors, smearing designs across their arms and faces. You're not sure if it's makeup or war paint, but either way, it feels theatrical. Here's the fact. Body painting was a common practice among Maya nobles, often used for feasts and ceremonies. Pigments were made from ground minerals, plants, and even insects. The cochineal beetle, in particular, provided a brilliant red dye that clung to skin like fresh paint. A noble beside you smears red across his cheeks, then grins, blackened teeth gleaming behind crimson streaks. Another paints delicate dots along her arms, the patterns precise as constellations. The hall glows with bodies turned into living murals. The obscure tidbit, some pigments were mixed with cacao paste to help them stick. Imagine smearing your drink directly on your body and calling it art. The air smells even richer now, like roasted beans mingling with damp earth. Historians still debate whether these designs were purely decorative or carried coded messages. Some scholars argue that certain painted patterns marked lineage or political allegiance. Others think nobles simply enjoyed looking intimidating under torchlight. You're handed a bowl of yellow pigment mixed with cacao. The servant gestures encouragingly. You dab a streak across your arm, feeling the paste gritty and sticky. Nobles around you nod approvingly, as though you've passed yet another unspoken test. 3 dry observations surface. Using your drink as body paint is the most literal version of wearing your food. A beetle-based red dye proves fashion always comes at someone else's expense. And let's face it, with sweat, oil, and paint combined, everyone here smells like an overcrowded art studio. The drums quicken, nobles rise, painted faces gleaming. Their movements blur in the smoke and firelight, their laughter sharp and sweet as cacao itself. You clutch your painted arm, foam still clinging to your lips, realizing you've been absorbed into their spectacle. An honorary participant in the frothy, fragrant theater of Maya nobility. The night, it seems, has layers left to reveal. The painted nobles sway and step together, their feathered cloaks rippling like waves of color in the torchlight. You can hear the scrape of sandals on stone, the rustle of feathers, and the faint slap of sweat dripping to the floor. The courtyard feels alive, like it's breathing with the rhythm of their movements. Here's a grounding fact. The Maya calendar often dictated the timing of feasts. Certain days were considered more auspicious for gathering, eating, and drinking cacao. These dates aligned with cosmic cycles, so sipping froth wasn't random indulgence. It was written in the stars. One noble raises his cup mid-dance, spilling foam across his chest. Instead of wiping it away, an attendant rushes forward with a cloth dipped in scented oil. He smears the spill into the skin, turning mess into perfume. The noble beams, as though accidents themselves are noble acts. The obscure tidbit. Some nobles reportedly used turkey fat as a base for scented oils, mixing it with flowers or resins. Imagine perfume made with poultry essence. It's luxury if you don't think too hard about it. The scent lingers heavy in the air now, sweet on top, savory beneath. Historians still debate whether these fat-based perfumes were widely used or confined to elite households with plenty of livestock. Evidence suggests both, but the truth is slippery, like the oil itself. The drums quicken, the painted nobles spin faster, and their bodies gleam with layered oils, sweat, and pigments. You feel your head spin with them, though perhaps that's the cacao talking. 3 sly jokes stir faintly in your mind. Dancing with turkey fat perfume means you smell like dinner and dessert combined. Cosmic calendars make for a great excuse. Sorry, I can't feast today. The stars say no. And let's admit it, wiping spills into your skin and calling it hygiene is peak noble logic. The music softens at last, the dancers bowing dramatically. The nobles applaud, their painted palms leaving smears of pigment on mats and cups. You clap too, though your hands feel heavy, your breath warm with bitter froth. The courtyard seems to sway around you, torches flickering like eyes in the night. You realize you've been carried deeper into their world. What began as sipping chocolate has become an endless layering of sound, scent, paint, and sweat. And still, the feast continues. The nobles sink back onto their mats, attendants bustling in with fresh trays. This time, the offerings aren't cacao alone, but small bowls of maize gruel, thickened with honey and chili. It's a palate cleanser, they say, though it tastes more like spiced porridge than relief. Here's a fact. Maize was the foundation of Maya diet and identity. Myths declared humans were formed from maize dough, their flesh shaped from kernels. To eat maize wasn't just nourishment, it was communion with the very essence of humanity. A noble ladles gruel into his mouth, honey glistening on his chin. He wipes it with the back of his hand, smearing honey over his painted skin. Hygiene here is more layering, less cleaning. You're offered a bowl. You sip politely, the chili burns. The honey clings, your teeth feel glued together, and you wonder if you've just lacquered your molars shut. The obscure tidbit. Nobles sometimes flavored gruel with crushed cacao shells, recycling even the husks into their meals. Waste not, want not. You imagine ancient cooks eyeing every leftover scrap and thinking, sure, let's eat that too. Historians still debate whether cacao husks added meaningful flavor or were simply fillers to stretch supplies. Either way, your porridge now tastes faintly like bitter wood chips. You smile, swallow, and pretend it's divine. The nobles hum with satisfaction, smacking their lips loudly. One belches with confidence, and others laugh approvingly. You realize burping is not a lapse in manners here, but a compliment to the cook. You hold back your own, though foam threatens rebellion in your throat. 3 wry observations trickle in. Honey chili gruel is the ancient version of fusion cuisine, whether you wanted it or not. Worker recycling cacao husks into porridge makes this the first zero-waste kitchen. And burping as etiquette? That's one tradition some modern restaurants might secretly appreciate. The feast hums on, layered scents and flavors, weaving into a tapestry of excess. You sit back, your stomach stretched, your lips sticky, your mind buzzing. The night is no longer a line of hours, but a circle. Cacao, oil, incense, dance, gruel, and back again. Somewhere beyond the walls, dawn still feels impossibly far, yet inside, the nobles show no sign of stopping. If anything, they seem brighter, painted and perfumed, their laughter as frothy as the cups in their hands. The courtyard grows hushed again, though not for sleep. Instead, attendants arrive with bundles of herbs and small ceramic basins of water. The nobles lean forward as servants gently wash their hands and feet. Though wash may be too generous a word. The water is lightly perfumed with crushed flowers, but it's murky even before the first hand dips in. Here's a fact. Water was sacred among the Maya, tied to cenotes, deep natural wells believed to be portals to the underworld. To wash in even a symbolic way was to touch divinity. Tonight, this basin is less about hygiene and more about ritual contact with the sacred element. You watch as a noble dips his fingers, then wipes them casually on his tunic, leaving streaks of colored paste and cacao. Another swishes his feet briefly, then pulls them out, glistening more with oil than with cleanliness. The basins are quickly carried away, the water sloshing dark with residue. You try not to imagine where it will be poured. The obscure tidbit: some nobles reportedly added ground cacao shells to washing water, believing the mixture would drive away bad spirits clinging to the skin. It made the water grainy, so their rinses probably felt more like a light scrub with sandpaper. Historians still debate whether these foot and hand washings were done out of genuine concern for hygiene or entirely as symbolic gestures. Archaeological records offer only fragments of basins, leaving scholars to squint at residues and guess. A servant gestures toward you with a bowl. You dip your hands, the water warm and faintly sweet. You pull them out, sticky with oils and grit, and wipe them discreetly on your mat. Nobles around you nod approvingly, as though you've passed yet another invisible test. 3 dry jokes bubble up. Washing with cacao husks is basically the world's first luxury body scrub, minus the spa playlist. Sharing the same basin feels less divine and more like history's first finger bowl gone wrong. And if the water's darker at the end than at the beginning, did anyone really get clean? The nobles lean back, hands freshly anointed or freshly sticky, depending on perspective. Attendants rush to refill cups with yet more chocolate foam, because apparently hydration means cacao forever. The drums outside resume, low and steady, and you wonder if this night has an ending at all. The torches burn lower, their flames shrinking, smoke curling upward like tired sighs. Yet the nobles remain vibrant, their painted faces glowing, their voices rising. A new activity begins. Storytelling. A court poet steps forward, his hair braided with feathers, his hands stained with pigment. Here's a fact. Maya courts employed scribes and storytellers, skilled in weaving history, myth, and prophecy. They recited genealogies of kings, tales of gods, and accounts of battles, all reinforced with cacao as both subject and fuel. To tell a story here is to reinforce power. The poet raises a cup of frothy cacao, sips, and begins. His voice is low at first, then swelling, words rolling like drum beats. He tells of gods who discovered cacao in the underworld, who brought it up to humans as a divine gift. Nobles lean forward, foam mustaches shining, nodding as though they are part of this sacred lineage. The obscure tidbit. Some poems were painted directly onto cacao vessels, short lines inscribed like captions to the drink itself. Imagine sipping from a cup that literally recites poetry while you drink. Tonight, the poet's voice feels like those inscriptions come alive. Historians still debate how much of these stories were memorized and how much improvised. Some suggest poets adapted myths to the occasion, tailoring tales to flatter the host or honor the king. The poet gestures broadly, spilling a few drops of chocolate onto the floor. No one flinches. In fact, servants rush forward to smear the spill into the stone with scented resin, sealing it like an offering. You realize again, nothing here is waste. Everything, even drips, is sacred. 3 subtle jokes surface in your weary head. Poetry on cups is the original, inspirational mug quote. If every story starts with, "The gods gave us cacao," it's basically sponsored content. Or, and when servants perfume chocolate spills, you know cleanliness has truly lost the battle. The poet finishes, nobles clap, and another round of cacao is passed. Your eyelids feel heavy, the bitterness of chocolate buzzing faintly on your tongue. The hall hums with approval, and the night stretches like melted wax. You exhale slowly, realizing this feast is not a single event, but an endless cycle. Drink, dance, scent, and story, looping until dawn dares to interrupt. The courtyard feels warmer now, though perhaps that's just the weight of hours and incense pressing down on you. Servants appear with fresh bundles of leaves, big, glossy ones, from the cacao tree itself. They pass them out as though they're napkins, though you soon learn they're anything but. Here's a fact. Cacao leaves were often used as wrappers, carriers, or even makeshift plates during noble feasts. Their symbolic weight was nearly as important as their practical function, as they came from the same sacred tree that gave the treasured beans. A noble beside you presses a leaf to his face, inhaling its faint earthy scent, then dabs his mouth with it as though blotting foam. Another folds his neatly, tucking it behind his ear like an ornament. You attempt to copy, though your leaf promptly droops, wilted in the heat. The obscure tidbit: some nobles chewed cacao leaves during feasts, believing they freshened the breath. Whether this worked is questionable. Imagine chewing a bitter, leathery leaf and expecting minty freshness. Still, nobles swore by it, their darkened teeth flashing proudly in the torchlight. Historians still debate whether chewing leaves was widespread or an eccentric quirk of certain courts. References are scattered. suggesting the habit may have varied across regions. A servant offers you another leaf, nodding encouragingly. You bite into it, the texture chewy, the taste oddly woody. Foam clings to your tongue anyway, stubborn as ever. Nobles glance your way, nodding in solemn recognition, as if you've joined their secret club of leaf chewers. 3 weary jokes drift through your mind. Cacao leaves as breath mints prove that desperate times call for desperate measures. A droopy leaf tucked behind your ear is less regal and more forgot your lunch wrapper. And if the goal was fresh breath, the results are about as convincing as brushing with chili paste. The nobles keep chewing, some spitting discreetly onto the stone floor, others swallowing with a grimace. Servants sweep the discarded leaves into baskets, treating the waste as though it too carries ritual weight. You lean back, your jaw aching faintly, your lips tingling with bitterness. The drums outside throb low, steady as a heartbeat, and the torches flicker like tired eyelids. Yet still, the feast moves forward. The atmosphere shifts again. Servants enter bearing shallow bowls of thick, dark liquid. Not cacao this time, but a paste made from ground copal resin. The smell is sharp and sweet, cutting through the heavy air like lightning through clouds. Here's a fact. Copal resin was burned in Maya rituals as incense, but it was also used in cleansing ceremonies, smeared on the body to drive away illness or impurity. Tonight, the nobles treat it as both perfume and shield. They dip their fingers into the paste, smearing streaks across arms, legs, and foreheads. The resin glistens under torchlight, sticky and fragrant. One noble presses his fingers to your arm, leaving a trail that smells faintly of pine and honey. You resist the urge to wipe it away, though the tackiness is immediate. The obscure tidbit, some accounts suggest copal resin was even chewed like gum during ceremonies, producing fragrant breath. You glance nervously at a noble gnawing discreetly on a lump, jaw moving slowly, resin glinting at the corners of his lips. Historians still debate whether chewing copal was common practice or an occasional eccentricity. Archaeological evidence of bite marks on resin lumps leaves the question hanging. Your arm itches where the noble smeared resin, but the scent is oddly soothing. You breathe deeply, your head swimming slightly as the smoke and resin mingle. Nobles hum approvingly, their bodies now gleaming like living sensors, every movement releasing fragrance. 3 dry observations rise in your foggy mind. Chewing incense as gum is definitely one way to skip toothpaste. Resin streaks on your skin make you smell holy, but also like a candle factory exploded. And sticky arms in tropical heat, that's bravery, disguised as piety. The nobles sway gently, painted, perfumed, foamed, and now varnished in resin. The courtyard feels less like a feast and more like a living altar. Every person, both offering and worshiper. You close your eyes briefly, the scent thick and heavy, and feel yourself drifting on waves of smoke and song. The night doesn't end. It only grows deeper, layer by fragrant layer. The torches sputter, shadows lengthening across painted faces. The nobles lean in toward one another, their voices quieter now, as though the night itself demands intimacy. A servant approaches, carrying a tray of small gourds, each filled not with cacao this time, but with water tinted faintly blue. Here's a fact. Indigo was a prized dye in Maya society, not only for textiles, but also for ritual drinks. Some feasts included water tinged with indigo as a symbolic cleanser, though it had little nutritional value. Drinking it was less refreshment, more declaration. We are painted inside and out. You watch as nobles sip, their lips and tongues turning faintly blue. They smile at one another, proud of this temporary transformation, as though staining themselves is proof of belonging. You're handed a gourd and take a cautious sip. It tastes like water that's been sitting in a clay jar too long, earthy and flat. The obscure tidbit, some nobles even sprinkled powdered indigo directly onto their cacao foam, letting the froth turn sky blue, a luxury dye used as garnish. Imagine dropping sapphires into your cappuccino. Historians still debate whether indigo drinks were everyday fare at feasts or rare indulgences for special ceremonies. The expense of the dye suggests the latter, but traces found on vessels complicate the story. You glance around, the blue-tinted smiles gleaming eerily in the torchlight. Foam mustaches were odd enough, but now the nobles resemble statues with painted mouths. You catch your reflection faintly in a polished jade pendant and see your own tongue stained like a child who's eaten candy. 3 drowsy jokes flicker through your mind. Blue tongues may have been a sign of status, but today they just look like too much cotton candy. Indigo water is the most expensive version of flavored water ever conceived. And the nobles' smiles right now resemble a very fancy dental mishap. The gourd empties quickly, servants sweeping them away before they drip. The nobles laugh softly, showing off their tinted mouths like trophies. You lean back, eyelids heavy, wondering what strange substance they'll smear or sip next. The night stretches thinner, yet the nobles are relentless. Another ritual unfolds. Smoke baths. Attendants carry clay braziers filled with glowing coals, atop which they sprinkle herbs and resins. Thick plumes of smoke rise, rolling like waves through the courtyard. Here's a fact. Smoke baths were common among Maya elites, believed to cleanse not just the body, but also the spirit. Unlike water baths, which were rare luxuries in noble houses, smoke baths were portable, repeatable, and infused with a sacred meaning. Nobles stand, lifting their cloaks and spreading them wide as servants waft smoke beneath, enveloping them in fragrant clouds. The air grows hazy, your throat catching as pine, sage, and resin twist together. A noble turns to you, eyes shining through the smoke, and gestures for you to lift your arms. You obey, and a servant waves smoke beneath your tunic until you feel more roasted than purified. The obscure tidbit. In some regions, smoke baths included chili peppers tossed on the coals, producing a biting fume that left eyes streaming. This was said to drive out malevolent forces, or perhaps just anyone with low tolerance for a spice. Historians still debate whether chili smoke baths were widespread or exaggerated by chroniclers who enjoyed describing nobles crying into their cloaks. Your eyes sting, your nose burns faintly, but the nobles around you smile serenely, their painted faces glowing with sweat and smoke. You wonder if holiness feels exactly like sitting inside a smoky kitchen. 3 tired jokes drift across your mind. Smoke baths are basically ancient dry cleaning, only you come out dirtier. Chili smoke as purification sounds like history's first pepper spray wellness trend, and nothing says noble hygiene quite like smelling like a bonfire for the rest of the week. The smoke thins slowly, carried upward into the stars. The nobles lower their cloaks, their eyes red, but their smiles unbroken. Another round of cacao appears, foam piled high, and the cycle resumes again. Drink, cleanse, perfume, repeat. You exhale, lungs heavy with incense, realizing that in this endless layering of rituals, cleanliness is never about being spotless. It's about being seen, scented, stained, and sacred all at once. The courtyard feels like it's floating, wrapped in incense and laughter. The nobles lean lazily on their mats, sipping yet another round of cacao, though now the foam seems almost excessive. Towers of bubbles threatening to spill with every movement. Your stomach churns faintly, but no one else appears troubled. Here's a fact. Maya cacao was often frothed to impossible heights, using pouring techniques that required precision and flair. Taller foam was considered a marker of greater skill, and nobles even held friendly competitions to see who could raise the frothiest drink. You watch as two attendants step forward, each holding a tall, spouted vessel. They pour streams of chocolate from arm's length, streams crossing mid-air like twin fountains, landing in bowls below. Foam billows upward. Nobles cheer, clapping their painted, resin-streaked hands. You realize you are essentially watching an ancient barista throw down. The obscure tidbit, some feasts crowned the victor of these pouring contests with garlands of cacao leaves, a playful reward that also marked them as champion frother until the next gathering. Imagine living your life with that title engraved in stone. Historians still debate whether these contests were strictly noble entertainment or if attendants themselves competed, with nobles only observing. Evidence is unclear, though given the laughter, both scenarios seem likely. A servant hands you a cup filled with froth so tall it trembles in the air. You attempt a sip, only to inhale bubbles directly up your nose. Nobles chuckle softly, not unkindly, as though everyone must undergo this initiation. 3 dry jokes float into your foamy thoughts. Competing for tallest chocolate foam is the Maya equivalent of today's latte art Instagram posts. Being crowned champion frother sounds prestigious, but it also sounds like a dairy farm award. And inhaling bubbles through your nose is definitely not the divine cleansing they promised. The torches flicker, the foam trembles, and you lean back with a sigh. Around you, nobles grin with cocoa-stained teeth, their voices carrying above the steady beat of drums. The feast is both endless and cyclical, spiraling like the foam itself, rising, collapsing, and rising again. The hour is late, though what late even means here is unclear. Dawn still hides, but the nobles show no sign of fatigue. Now, servants carry in great trays of polished obsidian mirrors. They set them carefully before the nobles, who lean forward, peering into the dark, reflective surfaces, as though expecting them to speak. Here's a fact. Obsidian mirrors were sacred tools among the Maya, believed to open windows into other realms. Nobles used them for divination, meditation, and even grooming. Tonight, they seem to serve all 3 purposes at once. You watch as one noble adjusts his painted face, smearing pigment back into place. Another stares into the glassy black, murmuring softly, as though conversing with an unseen presence. The king himself peers long and hard, his expression unreadable, his cloak shimmering faintly in the dim light. The obscure tidbit. Some obsidian mirrors were reportedly polished so finely that they reflected torchlight like pools of water, dazzling guests into believing they were seeing otherworldly visions. It's easy to imagine such illusions here. In the smoky, shifting air, historians still debate whether nobles truly believed the mirrors granted visions of gods, or whether they used them theatrically, reinforcing their aura of power. Either way, the effect is striking. You lean toward your own mirror, face half hidden by smoke and foam stains. Your reflection wavers, the surface dark and deep. For a moment, you imagine you see another set of eyes staring back, older, heavier, not entirely your own. You blink and it's gone, perhaps incense, perhaps exhaustion. 3 sly jokes flicker across your mind. Obsidian mirrors are basically ancient selfie cameras, only without the flattering filters. Nobles fixing their makeup mid-vision quest really proves priorities never change. And if your mirror stares back at you, maybe you've had 1 cup of cacao too many. The nobles sit back, satisfied, as servants whisk the mirrors away. The air feels heavier, charged with mystery, or maybe just with smoke. Another tray of chocolate appears, and the cycle begins again. You sip, foam tickling your lip, and wonder, are you guest, witness, or simply another reflection in their endless rituals? The courtyard grows quieter, as though the nobles themselves have finally tired of endless chatter. Yet rather than dispersing, they slip into a new ritual. Silence. Servants dim the torches, lowering the flames until the room glows faintly gold. The air feels thick with smoke and unspoken expectation. Here's a fact. Moments of ritual silence were common in Maya ceremonies, used to honor deities, ancestors, or celestial cycles. Feasts weren't all noise and spectacle. They had intervals where quiet itself became sacred. The nobles bow their heads, hands resting on cacao vessels. No one drinks, no one coughs, no one fidgets. Even the insects outside seem subdued, their chirps faint against the hush. You feel your heartbeat thudding in your chest, loud enough that you worry others can hear. The obscure tidbit. Some sources suggest nobles placed cacao beans in their mouths during these silences, letting them soften without chewing as a symbolic act of absorbing divine essence. It's equal parts reverent and strange, holding beans like lozenges in the dark. Historians still debate whether this was a universal practice or a localized custom in certain courts. The evidence is too fragmentary, too fragile, leaving only whispers. A servant presses 3 beans into your hand. You place one on your tongue. The taste bitter, chalky, stubborn. It sits there like a pebble, dissolving so slowly you wonder if the silence will end first. 3 sleepy jokes creep in despite the hush. Holding beans in your mouth is less divine communion, more awkward snack limbo. Ritual silence is powerful, but mostly it makes you hyper-aware of your own stomach growling. And really, chewing would be louder, but infinitely more satisfying. At last, the king raises his hand. The silence breaks softly, nobles exhaling together like a single body. The beans are swallowed or pocketed, the vessels lifted once more. The courtyard feels changed, quieter, heavier, as though the silence itself has left a residue. You swallow your bean, the bitterness lingering long after. Foam returns, conversation resumes, but the hush still hums faintly in your ears. The night edges onward, though it could just as well be timeless. Servants arrive now, with trays of scented cloths, thin strips soaked in herbal water. Nobles dab their faces and necks, wiping away sweat and paint in smudged streaks. Here's a fact. Cloths steeped in herbs like basil, mint, or marigold were common in Maya cleansing rituals. They weren't just cooling, they carried symbolic meaning, believed to absorb impurities from the skin. You watch as nobles press cloths delicately to their foreheads, then toss them aside without a glance. Servants swoop in to collect the used strips, piling them in woven baskets as though the stains themselves are precious. The obscure tidbit. Some records hint that these discarded cloths were later burned in ritual fires, carrying away the impurities they had absorbed. Tonight, you see servants set one small pile alight, and the faint scent of mint and smoke drifts upward like a sigh. Historians still debate whether this practice was widespread or limited to particularly ritual-heavy courts. The evidence, ashes and fragments of woven fiber, is frustratingly vague. A servant hands you a cloth. It's cool, damp, fragrant with basil. You press it to your skin. Relief immediate. Sweat and paint smear together, leaving your face sticky but refreshed. You drop the cloth into the basket, watching it vanish beneath others, as though you've donated a piece of yourself to the fire. 3 drowsy observations flicker. Herbal cloths are basically ancient wet wipes, only biodegradable and ceremonially approved. Tossing them into fire makes it the most dramatic version of doing laundries. Honor and the nobles don't look cleaner so much as creatively smudged. The baskets of stained cloths are carried away, smoke drifting upward. Nobles return to their cacao, their faces smeared but shining, their eyes gleaming with fatigue or devotion, or both. You sip again, foam clinging stubbornly, and feel yourself sinking into the rhythm. The night is no longer measured by hours, but by layers of ritual, each stranger and stickier than the last. The courtyard feels drowsy now, as though even the torches lean with exhaustion. Yet the nobles, painted and perfumed, press on with one final indulgence before dawn. Laughter games. Servants bring in trays of cacao mixed with maize beer, a stronger brew meant to loosen tongues and brighten weary eyes. Here's a fact. While cacao was the noble drink of choice, maize beer, called chicha, was also consumed, sometimes blended with chocolate, to create a potent, frothy hybrid. It wasn't exactly refreshing, but it had the desired effect. Merriment. The nobles sip deeply, foam streaking their already smeared faces, and then begin a contest of jokes. One noble stands, gesturing broadly, delivering what must be a humorous story, though to your tired ears, it sounds like a ramble punctuated by exaggerated pauses. Nobles laugh uproariously anyway, pounding the mats with their fists. The obscure tidbit. Some feasts included riddles woven into these games, many of which survive in ancient texts. They were often earthy, playful, and designed to spark both wit and blushes. Imagine kings and queens snickering like children over word puzzles, fueled by chocolate beer. Historians still debate whether these riddles were part of every feast or reserved for the more relaxed hours before dawn. A noble turns to you, grinning, and delivers a riddle you don't quite understand, his words tangled in the smoke and your fatigue. You smile, laugh politely, and hope it's enough. He nods, satisfied, as though you've solved something profound. 3 weary jokes slip through your mind. Chocolate beer is the ancient version of mixing Red Bull with vodka, energized chaos in a cup. Royal riddles may sound wise, but most are probably about food or foam. And forced laughter at noble jokes proves peer pressure is timeless. The courtyard fills with laughter, echoing against stone walls. Rising into the smoky night, the sound feels contagious, warming even your heavy chest. For a moment, the rituals seem less strange, more human. Nobles, painted and perfumed, giggling over riddles like any group of tired revelers. The foam still clings, the incense still burns, but beneath it all, you feel the pulse of ordinary joy. The laughter softens, the cups empty, and at last, dawn creeps into the courtyard. The drums outside fade into silence, replaced by the faint chirp of birds greeting the pale light. Nobles recline on their mats, their painted faces smudged, their perfumed hair heavy with oil and smoke. For the first time all night, you sense a slowing. Here's a final fact. Maya feasts often lasted until dawn, their rituals closing with offerings to the rising sun. The cycle of night and day mirrored the cycle of life, death, and renewal, a fitting end to hours of indulgence. Servants step forward with small bowls of cacao beans, pouring them into a woven basket at the center of the courtyard. This is the offering, the return of excess to the gods. Nobles bow their heads, whispering prayers, their voices hoarse from drink and smoke. The obscure tidbit. In some traditions, nobles spat the last sip of cacao onto the ground, symbolizing both gratitude and humility. You watch as they do so, the foam sizzling softly against the stone. Historians still debate whether this act was universally sacred or simply practical. No one wanted to drink the dregs. The king rises, feathers wilting, cloak heavy with night's perfume. He lifts a final cup of chocolate, sips, and sets it down. The feast is over. 3 gentle jokes drift lazily through your mind, spitting out foam as devotion feels oddly like history's first rinse and spit. Dawn offerings are basically the nobles' version of cleaning up after the party. And after all this effort, the gods probably smell as smoky and sticky as the guests. The nobles file out slowly, attendants gathering mats, empty vessels, and smoldering incense. The courtyard empties, leaving only the faint stains of foam on stone, the lingering scent of resin, and the hush of morning. You remain, sinking back, eyes heavy. The torches are out, the drums are gone, and the sun spreads warmth across your painted, perfumed skin. The night has ended, yet its layers linger. The bitter foam on your lips, the resin clinging to your arms, the faint perfume of herbs still floating in your hair. The courtyard, once alive with voices and laughter, is quiet now. Only the soft rustle of morning air moves through, carrying with it the smell of damp stone and fading incense. You close your eyes, letting the silence settle around you. Each sound slows. The distant bird calls, the drip of water from a basin overturned, the sigh of leaves shifting in the first breeze of day. The chaos of the feast feels far away, softened into memory, like foam dissolving back into liquid. The painted faces, the perfumed oils, the endless cups of cacao, all blur together now, not as details to track, but as impressions layered like brush strokes on a fading mural. What was once sharp and strange becomes soft and muted. You are left not with the sting of chili or the weight of smoke, but with the quiet rhythm of life, lived long ago, messy, fragrant, and endlessly human. Your breath slows. The air feels cool on your skin. The stone beneath you sits steady, grounding. The world that was so full, so noisy, so layered, has emptied into calm. You imagine the nobles sleeping now, their cloaks folded, their painted hands at rest, their laughter still echoing faintly in dreams. And you too drift. The night's story folds closed like a vessel set carefully on its side, foam gone, liquid still. You let yourself sink into the rhythm of your own breath, each inhale softer, each exhale longer. The past slips gently away, leaving only calm. Sleep now. The feast is over. The morning waits. But not yet. Not for you.